Dear guests, dear colleagues, it is a great honor for me to be here with you today, knowing that each and every one of you in different parts of the world is striving to reduce sexual abuse of children and improve ways to protect them quickly, effectively, and without further victimization. Now that we are connected within the European Women's Network Against Sexual Violence, we learn that our organizations have many similar experiences related to secondary victimization of survivors, among which the inadequate treatment of child survivors of sexual abuse takes the highest place. This is what I would like to talk about. In NGOs, when we work with survivors of child sexual abuse, we all too often encounter secondary victimization of survivors, a victimization that has been unfortunately reinforced by court experts. In other words, coming from the person whose word in the courts has the most decisive power, who are known to be untouchable, and who provide an opinion to the court that will crucially affect the quality of life of the child in the future and of the non-abusive parent. In most cases, it is the mother, because the judges most often rely on their opinion. I am aware that before me you are the group of colleagues who faced such challenges in your own work, surely looked for solutions and have your own valuable experiences about it. All too often, NGO professionals find that the sexual abuse survivor is reconsidering what was worse, the abuse itself or the insensitive conversations with the court experts during which she or he felt like a chess figure and not the person whose integrity and dignity were violated to the limit and who is likely to suffer the consequences of the survived trauma throughout her life. Thank you for having this opportunity to be the voice of those who do not have the power and strength to speak up about their experiences, which should not happen to anyone. Having their permission to tell about their being sexually abused within the family, and then again also within the system, which is supposed to fulfill a protection role. I would like to thank them for their trust and courage to share their experiences. A, age of 28, says, I was 14 years old when my world crashed. Until then, I lived believing that my grandfather loved me the most and what he was doing to me was not wrong. It wasn't until a peer at the hospital told me about how she was shaken when she had been sexually harassed by an older man that I realized I was experiencing something I shouldn't. It all came crashing down on me. The sense of security I had with my grandparents was shattered. I was disgusted with myself. I only heard from the police that they had sufficient information to bring proceedings. I was not important. No warm words, no warm people by my side. When the disclosure came, I was left alone. I felt like a tool in the hands of the system. All I understood was that they took my grandfather away from me. I did not understand that he would not be back, that I would not longer have contact with him. That this won't happen again. I haven't understood it for 2 years. Nobody told me that. No one ever asked me how I had felt. Abuse lasted for 14 years, and another 14 years for the trial to end. I didn't know when I was going to be called again for questioning. I didn't understand who I was talking to. His rights. I constantly felt that it was only his rights. They just said to me again and again, well, what was going on? Tell me about Grandpa. Tell me a little more. Again and again, I had to repeat what had happened to me. They seemed like asking me as if I had survived a car accident and not a sexual abuse. Hospital staff, police, court experts, social worker, everyone had to write some opinions about me. I remember an expert asking me to tell him what was going on and that he would not tell anyone. I felt it was a lie. I was afraid for my grandfather's well-being. I was no longer distinguishing who I was talking to. I was a kid all alone. I felt terrible. It was a great burden for me. I was still in high school. At home they said, "What have you done to us?" No support. Today I know that I am a survivor, that I'm strong, that I survived it. What would I need? For someone to stop and really talk to me, to learn what is happening inside me, not to backtrack only on what actually happened. I was just a tool, someone giving enough evidence to sentence him. B, age of 15, says, "After 5 years of therapy, I stopped talking to the therapist. A father who sexually abused me for several years has been released of charges in the courts. Again and again I had to repeat what had happened to me. Everyone asked me to repeat, saying it was not right what he had done to me, that I should say everything I remember. If he wasn't right, then why he wasn't convicted? I no longer trust anyone." The responsibility of the profession for its actions. Accountability is always on the side of the stronger. In the case of investigating sexual abuse, when it comes to such sensitivity of the crime itself, this responsibility is all the greater. The trauma is fragmented, but many professionals want the child to tell everything as a fluent story, and repeatedly. In our experience, we heard often the court experts were in doubt, stating the child was probably indoctrinated by a mother who was actually the one who wanted to accuse her ex-partner for sexual abuse. It is very dangerous to hear from the professional statements such as, "Sexual abuse is a popular issue," or "mothers are manipulative," or "these are mostly false accusations." They already have a hard time coping with the frequency of child sexual abuse and will turn a blind eye. The same pattern goes for the general public and the profession. The other very common question we hear in our work is the following: why do most accusations happen when the mother and the child have already left the abuser and not earlier? And the common answer is, it is certainly a woman's revenge on her former partner. There is a lack of knowledge at professionals that sexual abuse is often disclosed during divorce when children feel safe enough to talk about it. Previously, they were embedded in a system where they played their part as they did not have the power to speak about it. Whenever we look at the experiences of the non-abusive mother who tried to protect her children when there was a suspected sexual abuse, we see that the interactions between the mother and the child and the professionals within the judicial system are mostly very uncomfortable and often even traumatic. The service users with whom we spoke told us these experiences had led to negative consequences, having caused additional stress for them, either illness or feeling of anxiety in their child. We need locally accessible and free of charge programs for the support of children and the non-abusive to recover from trauma. Currently, children are waiting for a year or more to be seen by the specialist. We need specialized forensic interviews to avoid the conducting of multiple interviews with children, which often inflicts additional trauma on them. In the current system, children can be interviewed 6 or even more times instead of systematically making audio and video recordings. With such highly traumatic experiences like sexual abuse, it is of the utmost importance that the survivors do not suffer secondary victimization in court. One of the reasons for society to deny the sexual abuse is low awareness level and many extremely rooted attitudes that need to be changed. The patriarchy is not only present, but is so deeply embedded in ourselves and our lives that more than we feel like, we have to get rid of it. In fact, it turns out every time again how the oppression works in order to silence women, whereas women are survivors of abuse as well as mostly supporting persons to their children. Women who speak out bring real-life experiences that are by strong majority perceived as so terrible that it is better to wrap them up, distrusting her, calling her manipulative and aiming to take vengeance on partners. On the other hand, the reality check shows that every time we look at a group of people, there are many among them who have never spoken about their experience. It is unfortunate that they say they could defend themselves only for not speaking up about their experiences when they hear about such practices. And finally, it is important to create a safe environment for the survivors to speak, not to remain silent. That everyone within the protection system is aware of her or his responsibility of leaving a trail with their attitude, the way they talk to a survivor. We know how child sexual abuse is very hard to prove. It is important to facilitate at least that part, which depends on each individual having a conversation with the child, with a great deal of professionalism and human empathy and personal responsibility to the fact that you do not see the child's full experience. And with the humbleness and professional self-criticism of the fact that you are one of the key persons influencing a child's life in the future. By warning of inappropriate practices that lead to secondary victimization, we want to prevent such treatment of child survivors of sexual abuse and to point out the knowledge that there are adequate approaches and methods how to speak with a child in child's best interest. I admire children who are able to grow into adults and deal with the effects of trauma from surviving sexual abuse. I admire non-abusive parents. They are mainly moms who are too often left alone and unsupported and still able to superhuman power to protect their children from further sexual abuse. If abuse is not visible, if it is hard to prove, it does not mean that it is not true. We'll keep the European Women's Network very loud and visible so that we connect as many actors as possible that can help improve the functioning of victim assistance systems. Thank you very much for your attention.